Wow, hey everybody. Here we are on screen and everything. And we have a special episode here on a breakout that came up when we were covering a couple of indie comics that we came across called Kyra. And we got in touch with the creator, Robin Ator, who's joining us now. As usual, my partner Kurt here is with us, and we're going to be able to do a little dive back into the 80s and talk to a creator of a comic series featuring a strong female character. And Kurt, why don't you say hi?
Hi, everybody.
There he is. So yeah, we're happy to have Robin here, and Robin has a long history in the art world. I guess maybe you consider yourself a commercial artist, or um, we we'd love to give you the spotlight here, and maybe just bring us through a bio that starts out with the comics and what you've been doing since.
All right. Well, if you ask me specific questions, I'm really happy to answer those. I'm not really clear on what an audience that that wants to wants to look at Kyra would possibly want to know about me. I feel pretty uninteresting.
Right. No, I know the feeling. We put out comics back in the day, and we went on to other things. It's definitely still a hobby. People use the word semi-pro. Sometimes you're in college, or sometimes you're working at some other job, and you aspire to be in the art world.
Yeah.
So why don't you start out with how like Kyra number one? How did this come about?
Oh, okay. Well, um, I was in art school and I got it into my head that I wanted to be a professional comic book artist. So that was not supported in the 80s. I don't know, people who were there remember the 80s. It was mostly the Reagan administration and conservative politics the whole way through. It was a dark time in many ways. And so, yeah, I couldn't find anybody to teach me anything about comics as badly as I wanted to learn them. So, on the one hand, I'm a fine artist, MFA in painting, BFA in printmaking, that kind of deal. But
Uh,
because, I'd fished those waters and I knew that there was not a living in fine arts for me.
right.
So, my natural turn was to go, okay, well, I have this set of skills. What else can I do with it?
And yeah, you mentioned Reagan. He literally defunded the what was that? The National Art.
National Endowment for the Arts.
What was right? The National Endowment for it. So if you're hoping to make a living at it, I was in the same boat. I was doing this probably a little bit later in the '90s, but I wanted to try to get my toe into comics, and I was willing to work for small companies. I found that there was some demand in kind of like cheesecake stuff or girly mags. I was doing illustrations. I ended up doing some strips for men's magazines. So tell us about the concept, like where it came from, and because
Uh,
you did quite a few issues here, so there was some staying power here. So
there
yeah,
was
how
some
did it?
thought, yes. Yeah, I can go through all of those pieces to the recipe if you want. In the first place, during that particular period of time, I was working as a mannequin restoration person, where I would take in department store mannequins that were broken and taught myself to work with fiberglass and plaster and paint and refurbish them. And that was that brought in some cash. So I'm surrounded by these pink and purple bodies all day long. At the same time, too, while I'm in school, as part of my graduate studies, I'm also teaching a class in life drawing. So part of my job is to explain anatomy to people who don't really know what they're looking at and trying to draw it, doing their best. And so I've got anatomy on the brain. Uh, at the same time, in the 80s, people have forgotten it in the waves of time. But there was this new phenomenon called women's bodybuilding.
Mm-hmm.
And people are familiar with maybe Mr. Olympia and some of the figures that from that time, which were male. But not a lot of people understand that at the time, the rise of feminism, counter to the conservative wave at the time, was strength politics amongst women. So while I'm in the gym at school doing my, workouts just to stay healthy, around me I'm seeing women, with the wrist straps and the wide belts going for powerlifting. And this is like a new phenomenon. I once I once I registered that in my tiny little artist brain, I started drawing them, and then also I would subscribe to niche publications. I don't know what they're called anymore, but they would feature photographs from the contests of women's bodybuilding. So I became aware of people like, say, a Corey Everson or a Cami Lesko, or people of that time who were pushing the boundaries of what it was like to have feminine beauty. Here I am male, I'm an outsider, I'm an observer, but I'm doing what I can to understand it. And
You're an artist.
and as an artist too, because
Yeah.
once I'd registered this phenomenon, I realized that in all of human history, there wasn't a corollary to this. There was no place in art history you could go to see an image of a strong feminine body. We were just now in the 80s figuring out or finding out what that even was. And the politics that surrounded that were fierce. So, on the one hand, you had women bodybuilders who saw themselves as the successors to the beach bathing beauty sort of contests with the high heels and the sash. And then the others who were on the opposite end of that rainbow saying, this is brand new. We want to do whatever it's possible for us to do. It can't be unfeminine because we're women and we're doing this. Just
Right.
by definition, it's a femininity, even though it hasn't been seen before or had not been seen before.
Right.
So there's that.
Yeah. So that. Yeah. So I know that there were flashes of female bodybuilders. I mean, if you Google it, you can find some very rare examples, but it wasn't. It definitely was not a mainstream, kind of accepted aesthetic. It's certainly not in Hollywood, not in the comic world. Um, we're making a character called Turbo Pit Fighter, and I'm one of the reasons why I'm doing this is because you know I say, wow, there's nothing in the space. Maybe you could say She-Hulk is like a character that that's muscular and strong and everything. Um, but you really have to look to maybe like some of the underground, like Robert Crumb had an aesthetic, where he drew these really powerful women. Um, but he was, and he had some sequential, storylines. He had, the woman with the bird head and everything, and but that was Robert Crumb. He's a whole, a whole other, kind of rabbit hole, into his personal mind and his personal aesthetics.
Personal
Um,
quirks,
so
almost a separate
yeah,
category.
quirks. I mean, yeah, people could do an hour, on Crumb, and the good and the bad. But he was somebody that did draw, some strong women, and he put it out there. Um, you know, but not too many others, and when we found Kyra comics and a couple of others examples, maybe like here's Gilbert Hernandez. He did some strong female characters. This is probably later on. Um, and there's the Bill Black stuff. He drew superheroes, female superheroes. But I would say that they were mostly svelte. They're really not like kind of like the muscular body type or stocky body types. You come across stuff like this once in a while. The European influence things. But I noticed that your character definitely had kind of like a jungle girl aspect to it, and that if you look at the back cover, that it related to a character named Kagina, where there's a little history. Can you bring us through the I guess the in the storyline, the origin of the Kyra character?
Yeah, yeah, you bet. There's more history involved here, and I hope you don't mind me going back a little ways.
Oh, go as far as
The
you
uh,
want.
Take your time.
the jungle girl trope, or that white girl in the jungle idea, as far as I've been able to trace it, goes back to the 1920s. And the reason for that is the vaudeville and cafe concert traditions that go back into Europe. Those were variety shows. They were the variety television of their day. And so one of the popular acts would be a strong couple. There'd be the strong man, of course, the Eugen Sandows of the world, but there'd also be the strong couple or the strong woman, where some girl who grew up on a farm and was just tremendously strong would be brought in to do things that people considered unusual or entertaining. So they'd crack a whip, or they would lift a great deal of weight, or carry a couple of guys around the stage. So there was that background in history, but it's a very tiny undercurrent, which brings me to a friend of mine named Larry Heller, whose father
Hmm.
collected and republished material that related to that subgenre because it was his particular focus. So through Larry, I became aware of ephemera going through the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s of the strong women. And so they did not have the attitude of being bodybuilders in the sense of we think of Mr. Olympia, Serge Nubret or Arnold Schwarzenegger type bodies. These were just big, tough girls, more in the Iron Man sense that you see nowadays, of guys who are somewhat tubby and bearded, who can lift 500 pounds. The women looked like that.
Right,
They were just 6.5 feet tall and really strong looking.
right. Power lifters versus bodybuilders,
Right.
right?
So the same split occurs today where you've got the fitness type, rangy women on the one end, and you've got the I don't care what I look like as long as I'm as strong as I can possibly be women on the other end. And it's hard for
Right,
me to choose. I'm just interested in, the politics and the aesthetics and all of those things because they fed into what you see in the comic book, which was Kyra. So going back to Larry Heller, because he was taking over the business from his father of republishing this material, some of it was straightforward vaudeville, some of it was fetishy in nature, kind of the giantess trope.
Hmm.
right.
Maybe you know about it.
Yes.
Uh, or,
Yeah, Bill Black had a lot of that in his publishing
Also, the
yeah,
company.
attack of the
That
50-foot woman. The humidity.
precisely.
Yep.
Right. It's that overwhelming quality that they sometimes use. That left-hand page there that shows that figure is derived directly from that because the camera angle is right at knee height, and so the character looks to be 9 feet tall. But to get
right,
back to the story thread, Larry wanted to be a publisher, and so the two of us put our heads together and decided that between the two of us, we would come up with an idea, and then I would be writer and artist, and he would publish, and we would split the proceeds, such as they were. As it turned out, there wasn't a whole lot of audience for this back in the 80s, and I like to think we were ahead of a wave, but you know, whatever. It was me learning how to write a story, plan a story, draw a story, do the entire production down to the lettering and everything, just to prove I could do it. So there's that. And the Kajina part that you just now brought up comes from a character's name that we located somewhere amongst the stuff. And if you asked me who came up with it, I don't know, but it sounded like somebody's tribal name, so we just ran with it and wrote her into the story as Kyra's mom.
Right. And were you, so I guess the Bill Black stuff was a little bit later. He had AC Comics, and some of them, it seems like he had a run with female superheroes and male. I think it started out with teams, but um he also was reprinting jungle female comics from the old days, and also creating new content about jungle females and also giantesses. Here he full color reprints, and this looks like it was the late '80s, early '90s. Kurt knows a little bit more about Bill Black maybe than I do, but it was really kind of a in the same milieu of celebrating, the Jungle Girls that go back to Sheena, which was, one of the first female comic characters of
Yeah.
period. Before Wonder Woman, before even
Oh, yeah. It,
Superman.
it does go back. I love the genre so much. Even though I know
Yeah,
it's
and
impossible, I still do.
right, and then there was also maybe some film, the famous Tanya Roberts portrayal of Sheena, that were all relegated to B movies. Maybe there's you know still to come one day, a successful female jungle movie. I don't know, but this did have a little bit of life to the movement. I think AC Comics kind of slowed down in the mid '90s, maybe, or they're
Hmm.
still maybe going, but to a lesser extent. But your comic was, I guess, just out there as an independent. Um, it was Elsewhere Productions. So was that basically you and Larry?
It was Larry's imprint.
Larry's imprint. Okay. And so you were the artist and writer, and he was kind of like the editor for these stories.
Um, well, he never did edit anything. He didn't change a thing. Just took what I gave.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. So maybe producer,
sure.
publisher,
Yeah,
and then
he
you're
was he
the
was the
you're
guy who
you're the
put up the
hands-on
money.
guy. Right, got it. And so he did all the
Hmm.
printing. Right, and then what happened? So was it was distributed through all the indie stores and all the retail stores, because there were thousands of comic stores. I think there was about 2,000 maybe at the height across the country. There's only a couple of hundred left
Yeah,
now, but you had diamond distributors, and you had pre-orders in the preview catalog, and you would pre-sell copies, and then you knew how many to print, and then sell the rest, through conventions and mail order and back issues and whatever you could, right?
exactly. You have it exactly.
Yeah. So it's just the business end of comics. It's not very promising. I know myself. Once I knew we were having a kid, I had to get something more stable, and life takes you elsewhere. So I guess, Kurt, if you want to move on from Cairo, do you want to explain the next twists and turns in your art career?
Have,
I was just gonna bring in the whole storyboarding um, background that you have as well, Robin.
well, I guess if you want to follow that thread, we can do that. Um, See, during the 80s, those of us who were interested in comic book fandom, we did not have the internet, of course. And so our particular workaround was a thing called an APA, an Amateur Press Association. Our particular one was called APA 5 for no good reason.
Hmm.
And so basically, it was a monthly collation, collection of work that was done by the members, and each person in the group would get a bound copy, stapled copy of all the work of everybody in the group. So that was a further impetus for me to learn how to produce on a schedule, because I would be creating something to put into the APA every month. And
And the Apple was kind of like a listing guide, or was it just an anthology that had
yeah,
like sneak
Like a
previews?
imagine a
zine?
stack.
A
Imagine
zine?
it's a zine. Imagine a
Yeah.
stack of pages, 50 or 60 pages with staples on the sides, and you'd get it in a
Did
manila
you have to
envelope.
submit your own pages and then
Yes,
one person would collect them all? Yeah, that's the old school zine.
that's
Yep.
the central mailer.
How many sets were put together?
Depends on the membership, but typically you're looking at about 25 to 30.
Okay, okay. And then
So very
APA,
short print runs.
if somebody was to say search the internet to see if any of that ephemera is out there, it would be APA the number 5
That's
or
right.
the spelling 5. All right, I
Yeah,
got to make a note. I got to
we
make a
thought it
note.
was funny to have a 5 as taking the place of a letter.
I'm a zine collector as
And
well, so yeah, you're going deeper now, Robin.
Right. So this was all me trying to gear up so that I could credibly present myself as a comic book artist and try to get a toe in the door with with color publishers. Not Marvel or DC necessarily, but somebody. And as it
Is this
was,
after college?
right.
Is this after college, Robin?
actually, this is all during college.
During college. So this is, you said this is like 83 to
Yeah.
85? Around 85-ish?
Let's see. I started doing storyboarding work for real in '89.
Okay, okay,
So it would have been between 83, I think, to '89.
okay, okay.
So during that period, I'm in school and just leaving school. And so, everything you've ever heard about artists not having a life is absolutely true, because you really don't have any time except for work.
Deadlines.
So there's APA 5. And then also I have to credit my uncle George. Uh, George Clayton Johnson was a movie writer. And if you know of Ocean's 11 or
Oh
Logan's
yeah.
Run, then you know about
Oh
George.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So whenever I had questions about story, I would call up George, and he'd bend my ear. So those, I think that's the long list of ingredients that went into making Kyra. And from there, as soon as I had the chance to do regular comics, I dropped Kyra like a hot brick and moved on.
So yeah. So if you want to list your other credits, feel free.
Yeah, there's not too much.
I think Kurt.
I've got a couple of, for instance, here, there's a couple episodes, a couple issues of Terminator when First Comics
Oh
had the
yeah.
license. That's-
And is that the first movie
Right.
yeah,
adaptation,
yeah.
Robin? It is, isn't it? Right now, comics first adaptation. You did the first 2 issues
No,
of that.
I was one of the first artists. There were 3 or 4 of us, and uh, we I did a couple of issues. I think 2 issues, possibly 3. My memory isn't
Oh,
great
okay.
on that. And what else? I did a few issues of a reboot for Marvel's character Red Wolf, which just died somewhere. Uh,
That was the guy with the mask of fur, like the animal head on his mask, and he had a tomahawk
yeah,
and a
except
wolf on
we
his
were
back.
rebooting him, so he would be
If I
more
remember.
realistic and less doofy.
And by the way, he is a
Okay.
Gardner Fox creation. Just to make a note
Oh,
Really?
that is an important note.
Right, because Kurt.
there.
Yeah, because Kurt is the curator of the
He
Gardner
mentioned
Fox
that to me. I
Library.
think that's so great.
Right, right. Just in case our viewers don't know, but there are a lot of great characters there. So you created a whole comic and was this like on spec and it never
No,
saw the light of
they
day? Is
hired
that
me
what
to do
happened?
it, and I got 2 issues in before they just
Okay.
shelved the project.
Wow. And so even till today, that content has never
Well, I can
seen
show you the pen.
publication.
No, they're out. Jake, they're out.
I
Oh,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
are out.
Yeah,
Oh,
now
okay.
comics.
I could show you the pencils. Here's
Okay.
Oh, no way. You got the pencils? Oh, yeah. Oh, sweet.
Oh,
That's
wow.
so
great.
they do exist.
Right.
But he turned out to be an urban crime fighter in this particular iteration.
The Terminator?
Okay.
No, I'm talking about
No,
Red
Oh,
Wolf
the
Red
now.
Wolf. Okay, sorry,
yeah,
sorry,
Red
sorry,
Wolf.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Red Wolf never did actually get published, right? It just got
So far as I
it
know,
was
it's
you
Oh,
just
okay.
on a shelf
Oh,
somewhere.
okay.
and you were working with somebody at Marvel to create these pages.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting. So I guess you were at the mercy of whoever that editor was
Yeah.
and their comings and goings.
hmm
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah. Any comics artist knows that story.
Yeah,
But it's also true in the film world too, because as I said, the project got shelved, and at that time I was changing jobs from the mannequin store to being a character designer at an animation studio, and so all of a sudden I had a new life, and comics just became history for me.
right. So the transition to animation, this was for television production?
No, commercials and short films. The studio
Okay.
name was Will Vinton Studios, who are
Okay.
mostly known for Dancing Raisins.
Right. Oh, the California Raisins.
That's right.
So where's was this? I know you had I know you had been trained, but was this were you just kind of following, where the job opportunities were, or did you maybe have some heroes in animation that you looked up to and aspired to do work like?
Well, like a lot of us, when I was a kid, I looked at cartoons and said, I want to do that. And as it
Right.
turned out for me, that fell into my lap. And, I wasn't about to pass on it. I wanted to follow it wherever it led. And I ended up working with that studio on and off for 25 years.
Really?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Like they had a lot of great commercial accounts. They were a big name and they probably a go to for the industry for a long time, right?
Oh, very big deal. They eventually became Leica.
Oh. And
Okay.
then there was the
And
M&M's characters?
Yes. Funny you bring that up.
Okay. Yeah.
Why would you? They're known for that. The reason is because I designed them.
Yes, yes, that is on your IMDb page. So I wanted to
Yes.
make sure that that credit
Oh,
was
you
put
looked that
out
up.
there.
Yes. Funny how that
so
stuff
that
follows you around.
and
Damn
and
internet.
and so these are the Eminem characters that people see these commercials, and a lot of times when you're in the movies, there are these little interstitials. They're not really TV commercials maybe, but they're like like turn off your phone, don't disturb the audience, right? Those kind of things. So those were your designs, and I noticed that that's computer animation, right? That's 3D animation.
Sure. Yeah. Those were done during a period of time when computers and computer animation were brand new. We were, the studio was, by that I mean the studio, had focused on claymation. That's what they were known for, of course,
Right,
or stop
right.
motion of different kinds.
Yeah,
And
because the raisins were definitely claymation, right?
oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I learned to animate there. And then the world shifted again. So all of a sudden, there were these weird little boxes in the studio where people were saying, okay, this is the future. We're going to have to learn to animate on these computers. And the M&Ms were not the first project that we did, but that Christmas commercial where they meet Santa is still played. And that was done, I think, around 92, 93.
Very early in the game.
Yeah.
People might think about the little Pixar lamp being one of the first breakthrough examples of what we call 3D animation now, or digital animation now. But I know that what was it in Pratt University in I was I was just going from high school to college, and Pratt University was boasting about their computer animation department, and they had produced a Colgate commercial, with like a toothpaste, fighting in a wrestling ring or a boxing ring or something, and that was also one of the first. People were starting to see some of these examples on MTV, where they would have the MTV logo, and a lot of those were kids from Pratt University or School of Visual Arts that had gotten their hands on some of the early tools, and they were making these, and MTV was like, hey, we'll put these on if you put the MTV logo at the end. Do whatever you want, go crazy, and so they're very kind of inventive. So the M&M characters you're telling us was just at the dawn of the computer animation technology coming to maturity. Is that what you're saying?
Well, how would I put that? I'm not enough of a scholar of computer animation history to be able to say that for sure. So other
Right, but
people are going to have to be
it was
authorities on
definitely in
that.
the early going. Yeah. But the question was, are you still involved in the
The answer
M&M's?
would be no. No, I'm not.
Oh,
I,
okay, okay.
the
So
designs, the designs were
yeah,
done in the early '90s, and to the
right,
company's credit, they've stuck with those designs, and they have stuck with the characterizations that we, the studio, gave to the characters for all of
right.
this time. Like I don't, you can count up the years. I don't know what the arithmetic works out to, but yeah, they've stuck with the characters all that time, and it's because the company is privately owned rather than at the
Uh-huh.
whim of a board of directors or shareholder concerns. So,
Right,
so they can afford to just keep the same characters.
right. It's big business, right? I think that's Mars, isn't it?
M&M Mars.
That owns the, yeah, M&M. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if anybody's listening and you're deciding on a career path, whether you're young or old, um, you might, see yourself creating comics or animation or something and creating these wonderful characters. But in reality, if you have bills to pay, you might end up doing like, pharmaceutical stuff or candy or, whatever. I mean, when I had bills to pay, anything, that would pay the rent, and I would be happy, to get to work and be in the work in the realm of art. Um, and then I became a teacher, which is a steady paycheck. So you also got into the education game yourself?
Yeah, it sounds like you've had this discussion with students before. Yeah,
Oh, every single day. I'm a middle school teacher, so
yeah,
in New York City, in the Bronx. So I'm trying to get kids into art schools when I recognize that they have some ability and maybe some interest. So
yeah,
I can send them to like a fashion school. I can send them to art and design. I can send
yeah.
them to fine arts. But you have to be practical too. And
So true.
some of these skills are great fallback skills. We have these great fallback skills.
Well,
So,
I think of it
so
this
how
way,
has
where
your vector gone?
I'm sorry I interrupted what you were going to say.
No, I was just gonna say, please tell us, how the vector of your career or the trajectory of your career
Okay.
brought you into teaching as well.
Oh, um, well, so I mentioned I was at the studio for a long time. Well, everything comes to an end eventually. And so as I was being eased out, I found I needed another career. And so, as you pointed out, being a teacher is a steady paycheck, even though it's not a large one. Teachers don't really get much in the way of compensation or respect these days. But what I did was to
No.
uh, take my useless art degree and turn it into a teaching job myself. So first, I went to one university for a couple of years, and then I went to a vocational art school for another 10, 15 years. I can't remember, '06 to maybe 19, something like that. And then I went to
Hmm.
a fancy high end art academy after that. And specifically, I'm teaching storyboarding skills. storytelling skills, how to break down a story and present it in terms of a sequence of images. So, and the school that I'm at is receiving more and more and more students who want to be in media in one way or another. They're interested in games, or they're interested in graphic
Yeah.
novels, or they're interested in
Right.
animation in some way. And so they need that set of skills where you marry the two of drawing on the one hand and storytelling on the other.
So I have a
Right.
question that had come up in Jake and I reviewing in our breakout videos, Comics That Influence, part 1 and part 2 with Kyra. This is Kyra 678, right?
Yeah,
And it's
we bundled the last issues
yeah,
into one.
and we're referring to it as a trade paperback. Now, the there is some mention that this is 3 issues. The question is, why weren't the 3 issues individually published and distributed, and then why did it end up being in this trade paperback, Robin?
That's something you'd probably have to ask the publisher, but I'm going
Okay.
to take a wild guess and say that the answer probably has to do with money.
So he was sitting on your pages. So your pages were all there, ready to go out as
You would
issues, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
you had turned them all in, and yeah. Okay.
you probably noticed that the
Right.
paper
And then
stock is not the best inside there.
Yeah, it's definitely it's newsprint print quality, which I love. But there's also a misprint anomaly. You're aware of that, right? It ends up
Um,
that ends up
I'm not surprised.
there's a it picks back up on I forget where it was. It was like it ends and then it picks back up on, yeah, here it goes.
the pages are
Yeah,
yeah.
it
Let's keep
hits
going.
19 and then 20 and then it goes back to 13, which
Well, isn't that thing's mission?
makes it for a bigger collectability, Robin.
Okay.
Then there's it picks back up at 21 and then it does complete. So yeah, we definitely, when we were reviewing the questions that we were having, like just for the technical aspect of it, because storytelling in comics, we have this issue right now, which is we have 6 issues laid out. Jake has already written Turbo Pit Fighter in 6 issues laid out. And then the first issue is penciled, I'm inking, and he's penciling the paper. So you have this grandeur idea that you're going to make this big graphic novel, as it so likes to be coined. Were you just hitting notes once an issue was done, and then the next issue you were just picking up somewhere to just complete the pages to get paid by the publisher? Or did you find yourself in like, oh, wow, I really want this rounded story of Kyra?
The latter,
Oh,
much
right.
like you were just explaining that you had written out your script ahead of time.
Okay.
That's just good practice.
Mm.
You know, you're not going to film a movie just by, running around with your camera. It's
Yes.
not going to do the job.
Yes.
It's not like you're going to build a house by grabbing some boards and starting to nail them together. It's not how it works. You've got to have a plan.
Oh, you're such a
And
party
so
pooper, Robin.
I'm sorry, and my
Right.
students hate it too. What do you mean? I just want to draw.
Yeah, come
Get out of my face
on.
with the storytelling
Somebody
stuff.
pay me to do this, please. So,
Yeah.
so I'll interject
Yeah.
this as well. I think one of the most fascinating parts of Kyra that I believe people should try to find these issues to pick up is you've taken this to the Himalayas, and she has a goddess that she's in communication with. Would you like to expand upon that as the story arc?
Yes. Well, I wanted to build Kyra as a character that, even though she's unreal, that she'd be somebody who's somewhat relatable. In this sense, at least. On the one hand, she's clearly very capable. She has a number of skills. On the other hand, she's naive and a bit stupid.
Well, she's a
She's very
teenager. She's a teenager. You make
Exactly.
mention to that
She's
she's a
very
teenager, so.
right, and she's very literal minded. She there's no like Drax in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Metaphors just go right past her. She doesn't understand, and so her approach to life is very direct. And other people who understand life better, if they can stay out of reach of her hands, can run rings around her. And so there is that dance between what brute strength and impulse can get you versus what subtlety and understanding can get you. And so she's an illustration of that to whatever degree I was able to put that across, so long ago.
Right, and you have a couple of other characters in the storyline. I know there was a kind of like a bad guy executive female that
Johanna
had some sorcery
Starling.
powers, and then there was right,
Yeah,
right, and then there was also this goddess that was on the cover, this cover here, right,
3.
yeah.
and right, so there are a couple of other players in the storyline as
Oh,
well.
sure. Yeah, the goddess just represents what what deity figures always represent, uh, which is the higher potential of humanity. Whatever source you believe humanness comes from, the goddess figure represents that, and so to some degree, Kyra is in contact with it. So it's kind of like a moral compass, if you like, a
Hmm.
personification of one's moral compass.
Yeah, I like that touch a lot.
Right, and yeah, I like the visual influences on this one too. You know, you definitely seem like you were having fun like with the design of that. And so I never got to see the last couple of issues. I only have one, three, and four just randomly here. So Kurt is a little bit ahead of the game than I am. Um, but yeah, we were, and I'm sorry if this is like going non-linear and we're kind of bopping around, but you did transition from comics to storyboards, and you eventually became an instructor. Um, Along the way, you also had a pretty nice stint on the Tick, right? And you were involved in that.
Right,
I saw that in
right.
your bio.
That was early 90s too. I don't know if you know the artist Mike Plug,
Yes.
Oh
Werewolf by
yeah,
Night, and
Yes.
one
some
of my
others.
faves.
Yes.
He was the guy who put me in touch with the producers at Graz Films in LA. And so I worked on all seasons of The Tick as one of the storyboard crew.
Wow. Yeah, and the Tick is a very, I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday. They loved it as a cult kind of following, I guess, TV show, very off the beaten path, right? Even though it was kind of superhero related, it had
Mhm.
a whole different sensibility that people used to love.
Yeah. And it began as a black and white comic,
Yes, it did.
much like Kyra.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yes.
So you mentioned Mike Plug. I know that he was in the comics game, but he also crossed over into animation. I think I don't know if he did anything beyond this, but the opening of Ralph Bakshi's Wizards was all Mike Plug drawings,
Yeah.
right?
Mike's a monster.
And
He's
so I
just a
guess
wonderful guy.
he's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I just love the flow of his style. I just
Yeah.
love like just the recognizable flow of the Mike Plug
He's like
style,
the
and
next
I used
level
to
of
get all
Will
those.
Eisner. That's the thing. It's just he took Will
Yes,
That's a really
Eisner and
good
yeah,
he
point.
he took Will Eisner and he jumped off a cliff and he found wings and he flew. He is one of my top favorite artists when going back and looking, and I think he's just
Yeah.
underrated as well. But
Yeah.
for
It's one of the
that,
privileges of
yeah,
my
he
life
did.
to get to know Mike.
yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah, he was on Man Thing.
Yep.
Hmm.
He was on Werewolf by Night. I mean, anytime I see the name Mike Plug, I just
Yeah.
grab as
Hands
much as
down.
I can.
And with that being said, we'd like to keep these episodes at 45 minutes or thereabouts so people can get back to reading comic books and creating comic books. I would like to thank Robin for joining us on our very first comic creators interview. It really means a lot to us for him to have taken the time and sat with us and answered questions and given us a deeper look into his creative process and history. We also have a final question we'd like to ask Robin. Robin, what would you give in the way of advice to someone starting out in comic books today?
Be the best person you know at perspective and anatomy.
All right. So thank you so very much again for joining us. And we look forward to having more interviews as well as having Robin back. So thanks again. And you guys have a great one. Bye-bye.
Well, if I'm the first, I thank you very much for that. Yeah, and maybe in the future there's some synergy. Let's see where it goes.